Today on r/today I effed up. Today I effed up by telling my girlfriend's mom to make herself useful. This happened this morning and I still feel like an idiot. We were organizing the house and my girlfriend's mom popped by. After some chatting, she asked if we wanted help with anything as her day was freed up. I looked around the house and then said, "Yeah, if you want to make yourself useful and pull all the shoes out from the rack." She stopped, completely flabbergasted, and stared at me for a few seconds. I stared back at her because I could sense that something was clearly wrong, but I had no idea what. I think she could tell that I had no idea and asked me, "How often do you tell people to make themselves useful?" Turns out that it's actually a rude thing to say, and not a single person in my life has ever corrected me on it. Y'all, I say this all the time. So many people probably think I'm in a hole. For context, my dad is your stereotypical blue-collar, born-in-the-sticks kind of guy, so growing up he would always say, "Go make yourself useful," and insert activity. I always thought this was just some sort of quirky way of telling someone to do something. In fact, I even thought this was polite. I have suddenly been flooded by years of delayed embarrassment, and will never be using this phrase again. For our next story. Today, I effed by thinking our blood was blue. This happened like last year, but whatever. One day, I, 21 female, 20 at the time, was just working and thinking about random shit, as one does. I've always wondered this question, so I asked my coworker, 56 female, about it. I used to ask her the dumbest questions all the time, not knowing how dumb they were. I don't ask her many questions anymore. Do you think if we went out in space and got cut, our blood would still be blue since there's no oxygen in space? Like, pretend we wouldn't die immediately from being in space, though. She just kinda stared at me and started to frown, confused. "What are you talking about?" she asked. I'm like, dang, she doesn't know our blood is blue. 'Cause like, you know, our blood is blue till it hits oxygen. Then it turns red? So I was wondering what would happen to it if there wasn't any oxygen. I reiterated. "Our blood isn't blue. It's never blue," she said, still frowning. Now I'm frowning with confusion and rethinking my whole life in this moment. She can't be right, I'm thinking. Well, I thought it was blue, but I could be wrong. I'll Google it real quick. I suppose I could be wrong too, so let me know what you find, she says. She goes back to working, and I whip out my cellular device and go to Google. "Is our blood blue?" I typed into the search bar. A few seconds later, my whole life fell apart in an instant. I erupt into laughter for realizing how ridiculous I just sounded, and tell her she's right, and that I can't believe my whole life is a lie. I told her I think my mom told me that before I started school, and just never thought to ask anyone or look it up because how could my sweet mom ever be wrong? LMFAO, I can't even explain the embarrassment I felt in that moment, but we still bring it up and laugh about it now, so I figured I'd share it here. Let's dive into our next story. Today I effed by playing along with the wrong handshake and denching my friend. I am incredibly socially awkward, especially since most events where I live take place in bars and I don't drink. So all the bonding, inside jokes, and camaraderie happen around activities that I don't partake in. I also work from home, so these events are the only times I get to interact with others. That means I have a lot of friends, but there is always a distance between us and I feel left out of the more personal experiences. At a buddy's birthday party, I bumped into my friends Niall and Tim, who were excited to show me something. Niall had invented a new handshake. To do it, the hands make contact, but stay flat. You then slide your hands across one another so that they go into the other person's sleeve. Then you wiggle your fingers to give one other's arm a little tickle. This looked incredibly weird to me. The night before, my wife and I had watched Notes on a Scandal, and the whole situation reminded me of an especially creepy scene where stalker Judi Dench did almost the exact same thing to Cate Blanchett. But Niall and Tim were super into it and laughing. I'm so rarely invited into these close bonding experiences that I figured, sure. I'm confident and cool enough not to be weirded out by having an under-the-sleeve fondle party with another dude, reenacting one of the creepiest scenes in Judi Dench's acting career. So I did the handshake with Niall. I showed them the movie scene on YouTube and suggested Niall call his new handshake denching. They agreed and the party continued. It was a weird thing, but I felt included. In the weeks following, every time I saw Niall or Tim, I'd go in for a handshake, slide my hand along their hand, reach into their sleeves, and tickle their forearm. Eventually, I'd just shout "Dench me!" across the room as I walked up to them. I felt like I was finally getting close enough to my friend's circle to share in one another weirdness. After a couple months of doing this, someone else at the table looked weirded out by this handshake, so I told them the whole story. As I explained, Niall looked confused. That's when he explained it from his point of view. As someone who doesn't drink, I was unaware of just how much of the nonsense people come up with when intoxicated they actually remember. Tim and Niall had zero recollection of inventing this handshake. As the only sober person in the conversation, I was the only one who remembered it. So from their point of view, I was the weird one who just out of nowhere started sliding my hand inside their shirts and fondling their arms in front of everyone while shouting "dench me." Even after explaining it, they weren't sure if they believed me. On to the next story. Today I effed up by calling my pregnant 16-year-old sister bigger. So this happened a few days ago and I'm still cringing about it. My 16-year-old sister is pregnant, and while our family is supportive, it's been a challenging time for her. We've all been trying to make her feel comfortable and loved. The other day we were all hanging out in the living room. My sister walked in wearing a new dress, and I guess she was feeling a bit self-conscious. In an attempt to make her feel better, I blurted out, "Wow, you look so much bigger now." The room went silent. My sister's face turned a shade of red I didn't even know was possible. She looked at me with a mix of shock and hurt in her eyes, and I realized my mistake immediately. I meant to say something like glowing or radiant, but my brain malfunctioned and out came the worst possible word. Trying to backtrack, I stammered, "I mean, you're glowing and you look so healthy and strong." But the damage was done. She mumbled something about needing to use the restroom and left the room. My mom gave me a death glare and my dad just shook his head. I felt like the biggest jerk in the world. Later, I apologized to my sister, and thankfully, she's a very forgiving person. She laughed it off and said she knew I didn't mean any harm, but I still feel terrible about it. For our next story. Today I effed up by sleeping on a job. I work as a customer service representative, as a telephone operator, as well as handing email inquiries. I used to work in an office, but ever since the pandemic I solely work from home now. The amount of inquiries, aka job I have to handle, really depends on amount of customers using my company's services and how the system is holding up well. Today was a very boring day, barely anybody was needing our help, and the number of inquiries were scarce. So I thought it wouldn't be a bad idea to take a short nap, maybe about 30 minutes. I made sure my phone line wouldn't disconnect by placing AutoClick Grid on a communication tool and turned the notifications on and bumped up a volume, so that whenever I received the loud ringing would wake me up for sure. Turned out it was a bad idea. When I woke up after about 30 minutes, I got 2 messages from my boss asking me what the hell I'm doing. While I was asleep, I did not miss any calls because there was none. However, I slept on messages from my colleagues asking me about other email-based inquiries. I answered their questions immediately and finished my job, leaving no inquiries unanswered by the time shift is over. However, my boss is still suspicious, saying I haven't been able to focus on the job and I was away for more than an hour. Which is not the case, but it is true that I was sleeping on a job. The boss says I still need to explain myself and what I was doing for an hour next morning. I guess I have to spill my guts and say good old I swear this never happens again. Our last story for today. Today I effed up by being old and not knowing how Instagram works. I'm an older lesbian, 47. Been single for most of my life and for the most part I've been fine with that. But the other night I went out with a new group of people and there was one woman there who reminded me that I'm a lesbian. Literally, she walked in the room, smiled at everyone, and my brain went, oh. I'd forgotten what it feels like to be attracted to someone in person. It was nice. She's straight so nothing will happen, but it was nice to have that feeling of being happy when she smiled at me and stuff. Reminded me that I'm fully alive. So where's the F up? Well, that was Friday night. And in the interim I noticed that she had changed her profile picture on the app we all used to connect, Kakao, I live in Korea, to a photo from our night out, and it made me wonder if she had an Instagram. Now I have an Instagram account, but I do not touch it. I tried using it for a bit a long time ago, but it just wasn't for me. So I don't really know how it works. Her Instagram was pretty easy to find, and she had a few pictures. I looked through them but was very careful to not like anything because I've heard that you can see likes even if you unlike a picture. But you can't see who views your pictures. That's what pop culture has told me about how Instagram works. She also had some, like, albums above her photos. I've since learned they are called highlights, which are I guess archived stories. I really don't know. I'm just going on what I've been told. And one of them was labeled Jim, and I am a pathetic lesbian. It called to me like a siren song. And it was glorious. Tons of great photos and video clips. Her back is a work of art. And then I thought I'd go through the highlight reels. Every single one. I looked at every single one. Every video, every picture. But was very careful not to like anything. Later that evening I was chatting with a friend and in the conversation somehow she came up and I sent him a link to one of those highlights. The Jim album. And he was all, no girl, don't send me a link, you have to send me screenshots, and I was like, why? You can look, just don't like anything. And well, here's where I figured out my F up, although you all probably knew already. Turns out that with stories, which is what those are, you totally can see who looks at them. Now she would have to go and look to see who viewed her stories, I think, but if she does, she's going to see that I viewed them all. and she is part of this group that I am newly friends with and was hoping to hang with a lot in the future. I don't know that I can now because that is so effing embarrassing. The internet was a mistake. And those are all the stories we have for today. See you tomorrow.